billion. Here locally, that number's about 20 to 30 million. The existing platform for public housing is not keeping up with meeting the need for preservation of those units. And as a result, there's a loss of 10 to 15,000 public housing units a year. We don't want to see that happen here. Local perspective, I think many of you are probably familiar. The city of Albuquerque and Bernalillo County commissioned a study with the Urban Institute. Again, really focusing in on this extremely low-income population. It said the number of renters whose income is at or below 30% of median is increasing while supply is decreasing. City has a gap of over 15,000 units currently. So you see this converging. Public housing that's serving that very vulnerable population is aging, is at risk, and we've got a gap and we need more in the city. And so our response, seeing this, we advocate and we do our part. We've got to preserve those existing units, and where we can, find opportunities to expand. We cannot go backwards. We can't lose them. We got to save them and then expand them. So HUD's, one of HUD's solutions to this is they started a rental assistance demonstration program that essentially allows housing authorities to basically transfer these units out of public housing into a different form of project-based subsidy that then allows us to leverage low-income housing tax credits, bond financing, other debt sources, other gap funding sources. And we are actively utilizing that to preserve and expand our housing. Our first project's under construction as we speak. That's the Commons at Martineztown. That's rehabilitation of 96 units right there in the heart of our city. The next two projects are getting ready to close. We're hoping in June or July this summer. And one is located at Broadway and McKnight. In that one, we're able to better utilize that site. So we're going to be demolishing the existing 30 units and replacing them with 54 new units. So that's an increase of 24. Small numbers, but anything helps. 6100 Harper, we're going to be doing rehabilitation of those 59 units. And in these projects, it's not just rehabilitating, improving the livability, safety, and security for our residents that live there, but it's also we're able to bring in site management and services. My apologies, I see Isaac. Looks like you have your hand up.
Chairman and Director, Ms. Bridge, I had a quick question. When it says rehabilitation, is this just like the housing units stay intact, or are you tearing them down and rebuilding there?
Thank you, Madam Chairperson, Isaac, committee members. When it says rehabilitation, we're keeping the units intact. And in those cases, it's substantial rehabilitation. So it's typically, it's everything from improving efficiency of systems to updating, changing the interiors, things like cabinets, flooring, painting, in some cases needing to make accessibility modifications, improving exteriors and landscaping, curb appeal. We want to be good neighbors, update these to add to the neighborhoods, be part of neighborhood revitalization, but the units do stay intact. The exception here you'll see is Broadway McKnight. Those ones we're demolishing the units and starting from scratch and expanding them. And then we have a project planned on 60th Street. We have existing units there that we're going to rehab, but we also acquired an adjacent parcel of land in which we can build some new units. So that project, which is anticipated for probably 2023, will include both.
Madam Chair, if I could, I just have a real quick follow-up. Earlier you had stated that there were 57 units that were vacant. So does that mean that 57 units are are all of these are part of these projects? Or are, so like the 96 that are being rehabbed at Martineztown, are those currently occupied or unoccupied? The same thing for Broadway, McKnight, and 60th Street.
Certainly, Madam Chair. Mr. Padilla. So commons at Martinez Town. So in these rehab projects, our strategy is, I guess the short answer is both. So what we do is we relocate a portion of the units. So at Martinez Town, for instance, we currently have, I want to say it's about 25 vacancies. We're working on those 25 units. We'll then move some residents into those 25 units and then do work on the next 25. So we do it on a rolling basis. So it's partially occupied, partially vacant. In preparation for the work that's starting at Broadway and Harper, as units have been vacated this last year, we've left them vacant so that it's less people that we need to relocate. Broadway McKnight, we're going to have to relocate all the existing residents. Right now it's about, I think it's about half occupied, and the half that are still there, we need to relocate. So we have left units vacant in our other public housing sites so that we can relocate those tenants to other sites, do the demolition, rebuild, and then they all have right to return. Harper will be similar to the commons at Martinez Town. Like I said, we've been leaving units vacant as they've been vacated, just so we can be ready that when that construction starts, we can start work on about 20 units and then shift residents as we can. Our goal is that residents only have to move once, ideally. Some will have to move twice in that relocation. We pay for all the relocation and everyone has right to return.
Thank you. I see Commissioner Benson has his hand up, and then Commissioner Casada.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Bridge, thank you so much for this information. Very thorough. You've obviously have your hands full, and thank you for all you're doing. One question I had, it seems like all of these are family housing. Is that correct? Or do you do any kind of transitional housing for returning citizens or like sober living or anything like that?
So the Albuquerque Housing Authority does not do transitional housing. So all of our housing is permanent housing with housing assistance. There is a variance of populations. We do have housing for elderly, disabled, and families. So we do serve all those different populations.
And are they all like traditional residences, or are there like any kind of group homes?
Our housing, I guess, would fall probably more under the definition of transition, or excuse me, traditional. Yeah, that our units, we have everything from 1 bedroom through 5 bedroom units. It varies. Again, these were designed and built back in the 70s and 80s, so didn't always have the best use of land or even design in the functionality of the units, but some of them are single family detached, and some are like fourplexes, duplexes grouped together, and then we have 2 tower properties, one where we have 100 units in one tower and 60 in another. So we have everything from walk-ups to tower properties.
Okay.
But would all fall probably more under that traditional.
Thank you. Yeah, I was curious just when you're demolishing 30 units and constructing 54, if those were like standalone, bathroom, bedroom, living area.
Yeah,
Or
they're
54
duplexes, standalone, and again, due to the time period it was they were built, there's a lot of land around it, which unfortunately just allows it's a lot of times security issues. It allows for weeds and trash and other accumulation of stuff. It's just the design, there's better design in which you can increase density, but improve security and management and efficiency and livability. And by updating these, that's our goal.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Bridge.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Casada.
You're on mute, Casada.
Commissioner Casada.
Sorry. Hi, I'm sorry. Sorry, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. I think some of you may know that I've been trying to navigate the system with one of my friends who is a disabled veteran. So I've got some questions. He just called me today saying that he was going to lose his disability. And that was because a movie was filmed where I have him staying right now while he was waiting on his Section 8. And so the movie came in, and since he was there at the place, they paid him for being there, and he didn't want to get paid. And he's trying to figure out how to give the money back, and so they filed it with the state, and now they're going to take away his disability. But my question for you, Ms. Bridge, is can you work when you're receiving housing, and how much money can you make? And my second question is, they did offer him a Section 8 housing, but it was in Las Vegas, New Mexico. And I just fixed his car, and his car will not travel back and forth to Las Vegas, New Mexico, for him to, come and see the doctors that he's, developed a relationship with. And so we're finding a lot of navigational problems. And I know it's not your fault, and I know a lot of it has to do with, how things are written and what you have to follow through the federal guidelines. But can you kind of walk me through some of those questions?
Absolutely, Madam Chair, Commissioner. The first question, I believe, is can someone work and utilize our housing programs? And the answer is absolutely. There are income limits. So for our Section 8 program, it's limited to people that make under 50% of area median income, which I want to say is roughly about, I probably shouldn't shoot off the top of my head, but I can follow up and get that information to you. So for Section 8, it is capped at 50% of median income. For the public housing program, it's at 80% of median income. And that goes back to, as I was mentioning, that's what we want to see. We want to encourage through our family self-sufficiency programs is for people to find, go to school, get employment, start businesses, whatever is needed, because what we want to see is people being successful. And so for some people, this is a safety net, that they just need this safety net that until they can get on their feet. For others, they may be on our programs forever because they're elderly or disabled, they're on disability, Social Security, but we also want them to be able to stay in their units and be successful. And these programs work for both. And I believe your second question was,
let me follow up with that, because, I agreed with what you said earlier about, that this money goes back into the community anyway, right? So that money just circulates through our system. And so I'm distraught a little bit that, that there's such a low limit for somebody to be able to, pull themselves up from the bootstraps. He also deals with, behavioral health, bipolar. And so for him to hold a job, he hasn't been very successful at that through his years. And so he's always worried that that he doesn't take the job because he's going to make too much and he's going to lose that money. And for me, it's like that money that we give him goes right back into the economy. It's not like he's taking advantage or trying to, game the system. I feel the same way with what you said earlier when we're talking about Section 8 and housing vouchers, that money goes right back in the landlords. It goes back into our economy. I'm just kind of, and I'm not blaming anybody here on this meeting, just let you know, I'm just frustrated that, we can't allow people to better themselves because they're afraid to. They're afraid to lose the disability. They're afraid to lose the Section 8 because if they do make more money than they, and like this movie, right? This check came out of nowhere and now he doesn't know what to do. He's like, oh my God, Stephen, I'm going to lose my disability. So now that he isn't willing to go to Las Vegas to do the Section 8, now he may lose his disability, and I don't know what I'm going to do with him. So I just wanted to tell you that I agree with you that we need to fix some of the problems, that we should allow people to be able to make a living and figure out how to work, even if they're with disability. I mean, we've proven through COVID that people work from home, they work on the phone, they work in front of their computer. People with disabilities can do that to a certain extent, right? So with that, I'll let you get to the second question about, do they push Section 8 to other cities, to other places?
Thank you. Yes, Madam Chair, Commissioner. So the Section 8 program does allow for portability, meaning that if you get a voucher, I believe the federal regulation is you do need to use it for 1 year in the jurisdiction in which you were given the voucher, but then you can port it to another city that does allow ports. And so we take ports. So if people get vouchers in other locations and want to port to Albuquerque, we do accept those. Unfortunately, in your friend's case, he would need to utilize it for a year in Las Vegas, which does not sound like a good option for him. But there is that ability to port. And there are also, I just want to mention briefly, there are programs under HUD that they're testing with housing authorities about, like a move to work kind of programs. And it's stuff that we've looked at. We haven't applied for or received that yet, but the idea under those is, oftentimes it does discourage people from working because they don't want to lose their benefit. So it allows them to work and better themselves, not lose their benefit right away, because it keeps that safety net. But then if they're able to sustain it, then it's more of an incentive to try to encourage people to work without that immediate loss of the benefit. So there is some discussions nationally and among housing authorities on how we can do that and try to influence changing of federal regs that help in that way.
Thank you, Ms. Bridge. I appreciate your answer.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I see that Brian Egan has put in the chat income eligibility chart on AHA website with the link in the chat box. So thank you for that. And next I saw Commissioner Barboa put her hand up, and then Councilor Bassan. So Commissioner Barboa, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for this rich discussion. Thank you, Linda, for this presentation. A couple of key things have just stood out to me, right? That both what Commissioner Benson mentioned, we do have in county and city government and as nonprofits, shelters that house folks. Like we all know about the West Side Shelter. We know about there's youth shelters that service young people. And I am in the housing conversation. That's not usually that's not under, as I know it, it's not under housing authority, but it is a distinction from the housing conversation and the need around that. And I just want to note on that, and thank you, Commissioner Benson, for bringing it up, right? That housing and those kind of needs for shelter, there's domestic violence shelters. They also have their own big range of things, and transitional living, people getting out of re-entering from incarceration. Those are all housing, and that we're not talking about those specifically. And oftentimes those get lumped together as homelessness in this. Yes, these are folks that have maybe sparser, not permanent housing. But anyways, it's a whole different conversation. And also this conversation as someone who did receive housing through our housing authority. I was on a wait list for 2 years, a single mom on a wait list for 2 years. Thankfully, my mom let me give her the little bit of money I could. I'd buy some food with my food stamps for the house, which was I not supposed to be doing, right? But that's how I still lived while I was on that waiting list. And that is not so there's obviously a greater need. And I think you really pointed out, and thank you, Commissioner Quesada, for bringing up the conversation, right? We do have these sections of people that are probably going to be on it forever, disabled, elderly, for whatever reason, like when they receive housing, that's probably long term. And for me, in my experience, I was a student, a single mom. As I worked different jobs or my income increased, then my part of paying towards housing increased, right? And so it does sort of, I actually would say it's a great program that weans you out. You know, it takes your income, figures out what you can afford. And then as I made more money, it kept increasing until it was pretty much what I would be paying anyways. And so I was able to get off the program and get into stable housing on my own, right? So I'm like a success story of, but it also is just this certain type of population. It's not Commissioner Quesada's friend, right? But it is maybe a young mom, a young dad that are needing these services. So I do think for this council to consider housing in this whole complexity, that we have to think of those different sort of buckets or populations that are accessing this service. And I just wanted to mention that as part of like our growing in this conversation. Yeah, that's it, I guess. And like the conversation around homelessness is also a bit of a different conversation. So I just wanted to note those things. And thank you for the opportunity today and hearing this presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioner. You're absolutely right. We're one piece of the spectrum of housing, and where we're trying to help in that, as I mentioned previously, with our vouchers, we have a goal with issuing so many vouchers from a homeless transitioning pool, and that's to try to free up. There's only so many, you know, there's the people that are homeless and then they transition into shelters or transitional housing. And so where we can help out is that we try to help move some people from that transitional housing into our voucher program every year, because then that opens up more beds in transitional housing. So all these are separate components, like you said, but we all need to work together so we can move people through that spectrum of housing options.
And I guess just last, Madam Chair, right? Like I also just wonder why we don't think of those as separate funding opportunities for those different populations. Thank you, Madam Chair. That's all I will say today.
Thank you. Councilor Bassan, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, Ms. Bridge, were you even done with your presentation?
No, but that's okay.
I didn't think you were. I thought that we
well,
kind of got into questions and I'm like, wait, but maybe some of what you still have left might answer some of them, but I guess I was worried that I wasn't going to get on this bandwagon. So I have two quick questions and then I look forward to the rest of the presentation. But when people do decline for whatever, particularly actually, when they decline because of location, like it's not somewhere they necessarily want, do they go back into the pool? Do they go back into the lottery, or do they kind of just like it's a one and done? They have to start from the very beginning again?
Madam Chair, Counselor, where we have that happening most frequently, so in the Housing Choice Voucher Program, they get to choose where they want to live. So that's not as much of an issue on that one. It's more on our public housing side. And in that, we have established, which is the best practice for housing authorities, that we're only able to offer where we have vacant units, and typically to match someone with the unit size, there is usually only one, maybe two choices. So unfortunately, they would have to accept what's available there. And if not, then they would have to reapply at another time. We're not able to put them back on the wait list.
Okay. Thank you. I like Commissioner Quesada, you're funny.
Yeah.
My next question, it's funny, not funny.
Yeah.
My next question is with the case managers for the housing authority, is it the same pool of case managers for homelessness or is this like its own group? And if it's its own group, do they, I'm hoping, communicate with these other entities that are working with homeless, or I just am really I really would like to know if there's some connectivity with all of that.
Madam Chair and Counselor, the Housing Authority doesn't have case managers. So we have housing specialists that are working with both on the public housing and housing choice voucher side. working with applicants to get them the voucher, get them into public housing. What we're trying to do is make those connections with case management, and where I think there can be such a greater success rate is if we could partner the housing assistance with case management. So like the VASH program, the Veterans Program, is very successful because Veterans Affairs pays for the case management, housing authorities pay for the housing voucher, and then those veterans have both pieces. And that's where if we can find more ways to make those partnerships, partner our housing assistance with, you know, getting the people that are on the wait lists, that case management piece, so that they have a case manager, much like Commissioner Casada's friend. If there's someone that can help them navigate through these processes, because unfortunately, it's not easy to navigate all these federal regulations and rules for anyone. And so that's where if we need funding for housing, but also if there's funding for case management and we can marry the two, I think we'd see much greater success rate in getting people housed and then keeping them housed. And that's, I guess, a lot of what we're advocating for. And some of those partnerships I mentioned are with groups that we're hoping can help with that. But we do see when someone does come in with a case manager, they're oftentimes much more successful.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Bridge. And Madam Chair, just one follow-up comment to the commission, I think is really where I really want to direct this, is later when we have these other presentations that come up. I've really been on a mission to want to figure out what we have in Albuquerque and Bernalillo County as far as all the different services, because what I've been learning in some of the other committees that I'm participating in is that we do have an alphabet soup of services and nothing is linked together. So for those people that I can't see on the screen, but I know are here tonight with the Albuquerque Community Safety Department, with the BHI stuff that we're going to talk about later, I would really hope that with the data integration platform that's being worked on, we can make sure to incorporate proper communication between homelessness and the WEC and, you know, case management for that, with what we're working on for communicating openly with First Nations and these other providers that are public and private, and then be able to make sure to include the housing authority so that we can really have one dialogue in some digital platform, so that we can really help people and not reinvent the wheel with every single conversation that we have and every single committee meeting, when really people are working on it. We just need to all start talking together.
I agree. I think that would be a great conversation. And Councilor Bassan, I had heard that you expressed interest in actually doing some site visits of some of our facilities, like the care center and the resource reentry center. So I think that we should try to arrange that for anybody who hasn't been there, to actually go tour the facilities and you know, hear about how the parts work together. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councilor Senna.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll ask one question and then let Ms. Bridge continue, and then I might have follow-up questions. But my speaking on actually Councilor Bassan's point, I met with various groups very similar in discussing affordable housing, and it was actually our planning department. And I asked them what data do they have. They said they didn't have any. And so talking about a data bank of really understanding vacancies and needs. And I know that we're not speaking on the whole picture here, because we're also not talking about transitional housing, but is there any coordination of some of these service providers? Like for planning, we're thinking about our long-term goals 5 to 20 years from now and incorporating affordable housing into this, but we have no clear picture of what the current landscape looks like. And so this presentation today was actually very timely, as we have just had this conversation. So I'd love to follow up with you to get this presentation over to planning and have you incorporated into this planning discussion as well, as we're trying to think through years ahead, and even the Urban Institute study noting how far we are behind. And I already know that these numbers are old. right? Because of through the pandemic, numbers have certainly increased. So having an overall just one-stop shop to find some of this information so that we can navigate this, can plan for the future as well, and thinking about either funding or additional resources, how we commit, whether it's finding more housing stock or land purchasing or land banking, that we think that through. But I guess it was more of a comment, and hopefully that we can follow up with our planning department as well. And then I may have more additional questions after you finish your presentation.
Thank you. So Ms. Bridge, do you want to continue with your presentation?
Certainly, and I'll go quick, and thank you, Madam Chair. And it's important to answer the questions you all have, so that's why I'm here. And just on that point, I will mention, and well, actually, I'll get to it in a slide here. So this is our plans, and Councilor Senya, we are hoping to meet with you, talk about our plans for 60th Street, because I know that's in your district. So we'd like to share more of that with you. So that brings us to partnerships, and we have been very fortunate to have a variety of partnerships with both the City of Albuquerque and Bernalillo County. One of the items I have listed here, and this goes to Councilor Senya's point, is there are currently that came out of this Urban Institute report a homeless coordinating council. That's, from what I understand, their goal is to do a lot of what Councilor Senya was talking about, is how do we pull all this together? And there's representatives from the city, the county, UNM, and different other places. I serve on the housing committee, which is a subcommittee of that. And there is someone from planning on there. We have Councilor Benton, Commissioner O'Malley, a number of people from the city, Family and Community Services, UNM, different folks that we're talking about one piece of that, which is just the housing piece. But it's exciting to both see the work of this committee as well as that committee, and others we're fortunate to participate on, that we're making this a bigger discussion to how do we connect all this? Because when we're all working on our silos, yeah, we're making a difference in our silo, but gosh, that can be such a bigger impact if we all start connecting, plus not to mention and make it easier for people to navigate. Funding, both the city and county have been instrumental in helping us with funding, and hopefully we can continue to partner on that. We've received CDBG funding from the city that's allowed us to replace roofs and do security and safety improvements to our properties. Bernalillo County served as the bond issuer on our Martinez Town project. We couldn't have done that without them. City of Albuquerque has served as our fiscal agent. We've been extremely fortunate to get capital outlay both in 2020 and 2021 for these housing projects. And so that's just, again, how with that city support, we were able to go in and get some state funding as well. So we want to be able to leverage local, state, national funding to meet these goals. And I talked about some of the committees. Other key thing is Bernalillo County also has a housing authority, the housing department in Bernalillo County. We work very closely together. Our jurisdictions overlap. And so we have a cross-jurisdictional agreement that they can work in our jurisdiction, we can work in theirs. So people aren't having to then have the confusion of, well, is it within the city limits or not within the city limits? Because as you know, in the city, it's not always obvious what may be city and what may be county. We also provide each other services. That's one thing housing authorities are doing to help each other is leverage each other for services. So we provide inspection services for Bernalillo County housing, and we're going to be looking for them to do the same for us on some of our housing. As well as we coordinate with them on our family self-sufficiency programs. So there's a lot of ways in which we have partnered with both the city and the county, and really hope to grow those relationships more, to have these comprehensive collaborative discussions and problem solve this as partners. We're here to partner with you and help with you in that. And really that's it. So you'll see some photos here, some activities. Certainly this last year with COVID has been interesting, but has been beneficial in that the Housing Authority has been forced to find ways on how can we serve people that are needing to stay at home. How can we work remotely? How can we serve people without them having, in the middle of a pandemic, to get on a bus and come all the way to our office? And in the same time, we've continued to employ and hire staff. We have done property improvements. You'll see there, that's a roof over at 60th Street that got redone with some of our city funding. So again, this just highlights that our mission at the Housing Authority is provide quality housing and self-sufficiency opportunities, and appreciate the partnerships of you all, as well as APS. Like I said, I don't know if I mentioned previously, but I know right now we're working with APS Title I to roll out some virtual science nights in June for families at our public housing. So, and I think we've worked with the APS on helping bring Wi-Fi to kids at our properties as well as the city. So there's numerous past partnership opportunities, and I'm hoping more to come. And with that, I will stop talking and answer any questions.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Ms. Bridge. Counselor Senna, I see your hand is up. Do you have another question, or is that your old hand? Go ahead if you have another question.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. It is a new question. I just wanted to follow up some of the discussions. You mentioned this briefly, and I know, tracking some state legislation, having it not passed, but hearing from some of the providers and groups earlier this week, I had heard that part of our push for eviction prevention, there's a big pot of money, $170 million available for back rent pay. And as part of that program, however, there is people being turned away or not getting some of that assistance. I'm hearing of eviction measures, countermeasures rather, or some of these vouchers even being turned away. Some people seeing a lot of struggles between that or not being able to afford security deposits and sitting on a housing voucher, for example. Do you know, or have you seen people being turned away because there are, people don't like housing vouchers? For me, it's income security, to be honest, that you're continually to get this. It also was noted that it's economic development, that this money goes back into our economy. So I'm curious, what has been the resistance of accepting these vouchers? Same why I wonder why people don't accept, the back pay to stop these evictions. So want to get some insight.
Certainly, Madam Chair, Councillor Senna. Yes, we do see that problem. There are properties that will not accept Section 8 vouchers. I think largely, I think it's just a misperception, a negative perception that they have regarding Section 8 voucher holders. And so a lot of what we do was more in pre-pandemic times, but we did a lot of outreach to landlords, property owners, to really try to overcome those negative stereotypes, because you're absolutely right. 99% of Section 8 voucher holders are stable, great households. It is a stable source of income to a property owner. You have the federal government guaranteeing a large portion of your rent payment every month. So we really do our part to try to advocate and provide that education, because right now you can discriminate based on source of income. Source of income in this case being Section 8. So that is a challenge. Right now in the kind of rental market we have, what we're also seeing is our properties, our rental properties, rents are going up, vacancies are very low. So property owners can charge more rents. So sometimes they're not wanting to participate in the program, because we do have a cap on how much rent a property owner can charge. Again, because we have to keep that subsidy. There's some guidelines on that, but we also want to serve as many people as we want. So there are some landlords, property owners that won't participate in the program for that reason. And right now, that's really dangerous, because we're seeing where market rents are going higher and higher and higher. We I've recently started working with HUD. There's some properties that had project-based assistance here in Albuquerque that were purchased by an out-of-state entity who decided they didn't want to continue that project-based assistance anymore. They refused those contracts. And so there's 60 households that are protected and that we can now give them a voucher, but that property owner is not accepting the voucher. So a lot of these being elderly and disabled households, they were protected given the housing assistance, but that property owner doesn't have to accept them. They technically legally do, but they're finding loopholes in that they're not accepting them based on their screening criteria. And so unfortunately, I think we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg because our housing market is so strong in that sense that we're going to see more and more losing more what are currently affordable units to market rate. And that unfortunately is going to move things in the wrong direction.
Okay, I'm not seeing any more hands up. So Ms. Bridge, thank you so much for this very thorough presentation. And I saw there were a few comments in the chat. Be sure to look at those. So thank you. So we will move on to our next presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Approaching APS district-wide initiatives with an equity lens. Dr. Madeline Cerna Marmol will present.
Buenas tardes, Madame Presidenta y miembros de la Comisión. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the Commission. Let me put up my PowerPoint. All right, are we seeing the full screen of it?
We're seeing your desktop.
Okay, so you're not seeing the whole first PowerPoint slide? All right, let me try again. Screen.
So what we're seeing is your desktop with the slideshow, but it's not fit.
It's not showing the entire screen. Okay.
Right.
Let's see what I'm doing wrong. I promise I practiced this. How's that?
Perfect.
Okay, great. So approaching district-wide initiative with an equity lens. So a little bit about APS that I'm sure most of you know. We have about 77,000 students. We're the largest school district in the state. 2/3 of our students are Hispanic, 5% are Native American, 3% are African American, and about 2% are Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders. 17% of our students are English learners, and 128 of our 144 schools are Title I schools. About 68% of our students live in poverty or belong to families that struggle to make ends meet. The district serves students from 123 Native American tribes, and we're the largest employer in Albuquerque with 10,000 staff members and about 6,000 teachers. So for us, equity and looking at initiatives through an equity lens is imperative. It is something that we practice every day. It is so important. We look at the entire organization holistically because equity is everywhere. It's in our curriculum, it's in our access to technology, devices, and connectivity, in our facilities, transportation and food services, in regular and special education, instruction for all of our students, in student and family engagement, in social emotional learning, in human resources, in finance, and in counseling and nursing access. So what is an equity lens? we had the privilege of working with the Harvard Graduate School of Education about 3 years ago. And I had the chance to work with Dr. Deborah Jewel Sherman. And I really talked to her a lot about what is an equity lens and how we could start an equity plan here at APS. So an equity lens is the tool you use to plan, evaluate, allocate resources, and make decisions that will lead to equitable policies, procedures, and initiatives. At the core, the leadership team must use reflective practices, and at the systemic level, by acknowledging the importance of equity and creating initiatives with an equity lens, evaluating initiatives and deconstructing what is not working, and transforming the organization and structure with an equity framework. And so through the whole process with Dr. Sherman, I was able to start creating an equity plan and having her vet that, and having the peers in the course that I was involved in take a look at our plan. And these were people from all over the nation and all over the world talking about what is important in a school district and what an equity lens looks like. So we started our journey by working with many departments, not just the departments that were under me. I oversee about 32 different departments. So we work together, but we also work diligently to break down the silos within APS. So we not only worked with equity, instruction, innovation, and support, which are my 4 divisions, but we also worked with facilities, we worked with human resources, we worked with our finance department. And so we really worked diligently to break down those silos. And these were our first objectives. So we wanted to reduce barriers for students and families, align general education and special education curriculum and the tiers of support, align the resources and services district-wide, create a culturally and linguistically responsive classroom environment, implement data-driven decisions, create and implement an equity compass review at every comprehensive high school, and then equity snapshots at all of our other schools. So we went from those objectives in 2017 to 2020, where we actually were able to work with our Board of Education to create an APS equity policy, a procedural directive, and a framework. And so part of our policy says that the district shall implement and lead from a system-wide equity plan that focuses on family, student, and community engagement, leadership for learning, and academic outcomes. And in our procedural directive, we created 12 commitments district-wide that dealt specifically with equitable access to high quality, culturally responsive instruction for all students, aligned instructional and assessment practices in general and in special education, bilingualism and biliteracy, and opportunities for all students to develop critical racial, ethnic, and cultural competencies. So from these initial objectives in 2017, we were able to create and execute our equity policy and our procedural directive. And this was our equity plan. So in 2017, in year 1, we wanted to collaborate, break down silos, and reduce barriers. So we worked on all of those projects simultaneously. We really wanted to work within the system, and then we wanted to engage our community partners, our families, and really reduce barriers so that students could walk onto campus without having to worry about clothing, food insecurity, and those kinds of barriers that impede academics. Then in year 2, we wanted to build a staff plan, align our initiatives, and say what is possible in our district. So we really did a complete evaluation of what was already going on in the district. And then we wanted to see what was possible for the future. In year 3, we looked at the policies, directives, indicators, the framework, and wanted to create an action plan. And this year, we're in year 4. And so we're looking at curriculum alignment and a professional development plan. So last semester, at the beginning of 2020, we started anti-racism training for our entire leadership team and cabinet, and then for all of our principals at every single one of our schools. And this second semester, our assistant principals and the directors of our departments are involved in the same anti-racism training, and our teachers are involved in training for culturally and linguistically responsive classrooms. And what we have done, and then we have ongoing professional development with our language and cultural equity department, with our counseling departments, even our facilities group has been working on equity. So we continued with that. But what we have done is we have asked all of our trainers to meet together so that we can align everything that we're doing, because we were doing everything in silos and we had starts and stops and little pockets of professional development in different departments. So we asked all of our trainers to meet together so we could have, even though teachers had this training and principals might have that training, all the trainers were aligned to what our policies and our procedural directive look like. So next year, what we're going to do in year 5 is we're going to take a step back to say, where are we? Did our initiatives work? What did our professional development look like? What does our staff need? And what can we add to our curriculum? So this is our framework, and we use this language in all of our equity initiatives throughout the district. So Albuquerque Public Schools is a culturally and linguistically responsive, diverse community committed to educational equity for all students. APS provides various levels of support and assistance to students, families, and schools that are appropriate to specific needs. APS students deserve respectful learning environments in which their diversity is valued and contributes to successful academic outcomes. And our 4 core values are culturally responsive curriculum and training, equity-centered focus, an asset-based approach, and intersectionality. So every time we start to create any initiative in our district, we're always looking at equity. What is the equity lens for that initiative? And it is just great that now in 2021, anytime we meet as a leadership group, as the cabinet, if we meet for budget steering committee, everyone is dedicated to equity, and we hear our chief financial officer asking, how does this align with our equity policy? How does this align with our procedural directive? Our facilities, our maintenance and operations. So it's not, we have an equity department that has gone from 2 coordinators to 15 staff members. It's not just a department, it's every department working together for our equity initiatives. So my presentation was very short and sweet. As you can see, that is my email address. Please feel free to call me with any questions. And I now stand, Madam Chair, for questions.
Well, thank you for that very important presentation. I see Counselor Bassan. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Dr. Madrimal. I have one question really to clarify and then a comment on your plan. Did you say 128 out of the 144 APS schools are Title I?
Correct.
Okay, I had no idea that it was that many. Thank you. I just really, really loved the visual and the implementation of the district equity plan and the breakdown. I mean, 5 years, it takes a long time. That wasn't complex, what you just showed us. And I think that it's amazing that you all listed down these important tasks, kept them brief, because really the plan doesn't need to have every single answer and every single detail. But then you're seeing the progress. And now here we are almost at year 5, and you're all going to reevaluate. I think it's fabulous. And I just want to say well done to everyone involved.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Senna.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Dr. Serna-Marmol. I really appreciate equity work. I know that between Counselor Pena and I, we always bring up equities or inequities on council. So this means a lot. And thank you also to our board members as well for continuing to push these subjects on the board. And I just appreciate it a lot. I know through this process and the push for also anti-racism training, which I absolutely love. I know that we just instituted that among our leadership at the city. But I know early on in those discussions too, there was also talks about ethnic studies. Can you go in a little bit about that program? Because I think that's really tied into the equity framework as well.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair and Member Senna. Yes, so when I came in, there had been a directive that every single comprehensive high school have an ethnic studies program at the high school. And that had started the year previous to me getting there. There was not a lot, there was a directive, but not a lot of assistance to our schools on how to start the program, recruit teachers, what did the classes look like, and then retain teachers. So what we try to do is really make sure that our teachers did have that assistance and the resources and supports, but we know that it can't just start in the high school. We know that we need to have culturally and linguistically responsive curriculum in all of our schools. And so what we try to do is to still support the high schools, but really take a step back and try to get our teachers more resources at every grade level. So what we have tried to do is we found out that we didn't have enough instructional materials in any of our schools. So we have tried to purchase books for classroom sets and for our libraries. And we've also had in the last 2 years book giveaways. So we've literally bought thousands of books, diverse books that are written by people of color or about children of color to really support our schools. And so we've had backpack giveaways with free books. We've had a lot of books that are in other languages as well. We have a Zuni program. And so we can purchase books in Navajo. Zuni is not written. So we've tried to purchase books in Navajo, in Spanish, in Vietnamese. For our refugee and newcomer program, we've tried to purchase books for those students and really create resource centers for our families that have those kinds of books. So we've been doing that and trying to really work with our partners at UNM with the Indian Pueblo Cultural Center, our African American groups to really have curriculum resources for our teachers that they can seamlessly use in social studies classes. We are challenged at the high school with what's called making a class. So what happens is our ethnic studies classes are electives. And if we don't have a certain amount of students who want to be in that elective, then that class doesn't make. And so that's why we're trying to incorporate more curriculum, especially in our social studies classes. That way we can offer ethnic studies, Chicano studies, African American studies, Asian American studies, ethnic studies to more students. And so we had, we had this plan, but we took a little step back. We also need help with our partners, our universities, to really help us grow more teachers that can teach ethnic studies. So it's really important for us to work with our universities. And we've been trying to convince the New Mexico Public Education Department to create a licensure program for ethnic studies so that our teachers have that pathway to teach ethnic studies.
Thanks. I see that school board member Patterson has her hand up. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Serna-Marmol, thank you so very much for the presentation and all the work that you do in our district. I just want to see if you can share with us your work on a district equity scorecard, if you want to share that information with our folks here today. Thank you.
Sure. So we have been working with an organization out of Denver called the Western Education Equity Alliance Council, WEAC. And we've been working with them for about 3 years, and they created an equity, oh gosh, it's not the scorecard, it's the more comprehensive, but it's an equity indicator framework for us. And they had started working with some large districts, and we got in touch with them, and they agreed to come out to Albuquerque to look at our comprehensive high schools. We're halfway finished with our equity compass reviews at our high schools, and they're very comprehensive documents. They evaluate what we're doing with students, families, family engagement, curriculum. Is our curriculum rigorous? They're looking at instructional materials. They're really looking at if we're providing high quality. So it's not just equity, but high quality core content. And so we're halfway done. Unfortunately, the pandemic really hurt us. We tried to do a couple of them virtually, and they really didn't work out that well. But because we have 13 comprehensive high schools and then another 130 schools, they're not able to come out and help us with the other 130 schools. So what we did was work with them to create an equity snapshot, and it's a shorter version of that rubric. And so we have about 25 pilot schools that we're going to be working with. We were going to start now at the end of March, but then when the PED asked us to go in person, our schools really felt that they did not have the capacity to begin the snapshot this semester. So we're going to start with those schools in the fall and looking at where they are on their equity journey. And that way we can create support and resources as a district to help each school individually where they're at. And I apologize, I didn't put up our, I'm not sure if you were given it, I did not put up our Albuquerque Public Schools statement on Asian American and Pacific Islander community. And so this is a lot of the work that we do as well. We work with communications to get information out. And it was a statement that we made about not tolerating the disturbing situations that are happening in our nation. And, you know, Asian American and Pacific Islander individuals being targeted. I don't know if you got a copy of that with our PowerPoint, but I just wanted to point out that those are other things that we work on through our equity department, and it's really important to us. We recently also helped our communications department with a statement on the George Floyd trial and the outcomes of the trial. So those are other things that we do as well.
Gracias. Muchas gracias, señora Marmol.
De nada.
Thank you. Commissioner Benson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Dr. Serna Marmol. Fantastic work. So one question, so I serve on the audit committee for APS at the pleasure of board member Patterson and Armijo. And so again, I'm thrilled at what you're doing. And my first wife, before she passed away, was a APS school teacher at Pajarito. And we went to Michigan for graduate school, for my graduate school. And she was snapped up by the university there as a faculty member to teach multicultural education in the classroom. And we had both grown up here, and so we kind of took it for granted. We live in a beautiful state, culturally especially. And she especially was surprised at how far advanced New Mexico really was compared to a state like Michigan, anyway, in terms of the cultural diversity and awareness. And that was before any of the work that you're doing. So I see this, and you've already taken it, miles ahead. That was the early 2000s. I wonder, and this kind of reflects on board member Patterson's question in terms of your rating and the organization in Denver, but how is APS doing, compared to the rest of the country? We live in such a, close perspective. I would assume that it's good, that we can do better, but yeah, what's your perspective on that?
So Madam Chair and Member Benson, I did like you until you told me you went to Michigan.
But I came back.
I went to Notre Dame, so we're kind of.
Oh, right on, yeah.
But no, in working with the Council of Great City Schools, which are the largest school districts in the country, and again, working with our other national partners, I feel that we have done a lot of work that other school districts have not accomplished. And I think it's because, the cultures in New Mexico, it's on our radar. It's really important to us. And I think we're leaders in the state as well. We, in 2017, started an equity council when other school districts had not done that. We started with our tribal consultations and African American forums. We started a Yazi Martinez committee before these became mandates from the state. So in the last year or so, these have become mandates of the state. And so I've had friends from all over. Before I was at APS, I worked for the Legislative Finance Committee. And so I traveled to many school districts from Farmington all the way down to Columbus to Deming. And so I knew many superintendents, people that were in my position as well. And so lots of them called me, Madeline, what are you guys doing? Can you send us your plan? We don't know what to do for professional development. Can you help us? And so I think that we're doing a good job. I think that there's some schools that are doing phenomenally, and there's some schools that are struggling. There's many more miles to go. We are not at a point where I can say, wow, we're all equity experts. Even myself, and I've spent a lot of time in this, I don't consider myself an expert because I'm always learning new things. And I agree with you. Sometimes we take these things for granted. I grew up in what I call the Taos bubble, where 80% of the people that I went to school look like me. And our mayor was Hispanic, our representatives, we had lots of role models. So when I did go to college and there were only 50 Hispanic students there, it was a little bit of a culture shock, but
Notre Dame.
Yeah, and there were at that time, there were 3 men to every woman female student. So, many times I became the role model for every single Hispanic or every single woman in my class. But I think that with having these initiatives and these programs, we're going to help our students just become stronger and stronger, and our staff as well. We do have some things that happen in our district, and we confront them, We have a really strong OEOS and Title IX department. We have a really strong equity department. And I think we're able to reflect on some of those things that happen in our district and really talk about them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, I guess not. So thank you so much, Dr. Madeline Cerna Marmol. And we look forward to further reports.
Great, I appreciate you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So moving on to old business, continuing behavioral health initiative updates. We will hear from Dr. Dan Duhigg on the Addiction Treatment Advisory Board update on addiction treatment for inmates. And it was Commissioner Barboa who requested the update. So go ahead, Dr. Duhigg.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and to the entire committee or board. The Addiction Treatment Advisory Board is eager to generate recommendations for how things are operated at MDC. Commissioner Barboa, Margarita Chavez, many others are extremely certainly concerned and actively hosting dialogue and having that dialogue with us. We met with the Metropolitan Detention Center, and at this point, what would be really helpful, because the Addiction Treatment Advisory Board is full of people who want to certainly weigh in on the topic and help as much as possible. In order to do that, we need information. Any help from individuals, certainly on this call, with regards to encouraging Centurion to come to the table and have dialogue with us and share some of their procedures and policies would really help us be able to weigh in and provide any guidance, recommendations, strategies, or thoughts that we're able to generate.
Okay.
For folks who maybe not, or please, Madam Chair.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Just for folks who may or may not be aware, and why I specifically am asking this about Centurion, is that Centurion is the medical provider at MDC. And so when folks come into jail, there is a process for identifying, are they using substances, are they intoxicated, and are they at risk for a pending withdrawal? And Centurion is kind of the first step in that process, which is why it'd be just great to have some eyes onto their standard operating procedures and policies.
Okay. Commissioner Casada, I saw your hand go up first. You're muted.
Sorry. If I'm not mistaken, we're about to change providers. Our provider's about, I guess they're about to back out. And something that I asked and I'm hopeful that when we look for a new provider up at MDC, that we look for a local company. We look for somebody who's going to be have investment in this community, and that way we create jobs in New Mexico, and we create those types of opportunities, because when that happens, it's easier to work together. It's easier to come together to figure out these issues that we deal with, especially up at MDC, and how we're providing and how things move forward. So I think I'm correct in saying that. I don't know if that was supposed to be a secret or I let out a big secret, but I don't know. But yeah, I'm always in trouble anyway, so it don't matter. But I'm hoping that we find somebody locally. When I was on the school board, when I was asking for an employee health center, so teachers could go to their own provider back when I was on the school board. I pushed really hard for that. Unfortunately, we got to a point where they didn't know where to build that because APS is so big that there's really not a central location for that kind of idea. But when we were moving forward with that, they hired someone from Tennessee. And so when they hired someone from Tennessee, I kind of backed away from the whole idea just because that wasn't the purpose. That wasn't my purpose. My purpose was, how do we provide opportunities? They said, well, they have experience. And I said, well, you know how local people get experience, right? You give them the job, you give them the opportunity, and then they gain experience. And then they have people like Mr. Duhigg to help them, guide them in a way where they can be successful, and where we have Margarita Chavez also to help guide them and get them in the right direction. And then we create our own system that's self-sustaining here in New Mexico. So I just wanted to make that comment and to let everybody know that we're now looking for a new provider, and I'm hopeful that it's someone local and that we do it in that way. Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry.
Thanks. Commissioner Barbeau, I know you're the one who asked for the update, so take it away.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Dr. Duhigg. I just to put a little context around it, right? Folks may have seen that there's been 9 deaths since the beginning of the year in MDC, and more than half of them have been indicated that they were likely from detoxing, right? And we actually have good systems in place. COVID has added a lot of obviously has shook up our whole world, but we were offering Suboxone, we were offering methadone treatment, medicated assisted treatment for folks. And Margarita has shared with us in other times, right, that they're going to start reintegrating that. What my in really trying to dig deep in this, right, was to see and when I look at our ATAB, we have all these great councils and commissions that we appoint folks to, and the Addiction Treatment Advisory Board that Dr. Duhigg chairs. When you look at that committee is so rich with just experts, people that have been doing this work, know the work in New Mexico, and I just feel like as I was looking, and I actually asked Julianne sent me the sort of point of this board, of this commission, the ABCGC, and I keep getting that wrong. And this really is I'd like to see this as a working group where we dive into some of these. Like I was reading through the first charter around this was like really that this committee across all our expertise as city, county, and including APS it says in there, right, that we should be vetting programs or hearing from the experts as to what are the newest models, what are the newest innovative spaces and places that we're moving. So definitely on MDC, I think that is a easy fruit to pick, in that we can say, okay, we have the experts. We run MDC. They should be listening to the experts. We should be having the medicated treated assistants, and the way they should be helping us create the criteria for how and why. Because some of the problems that I've heard, right, have been that like there's not if somebody gets incarcerated on a Friday and they do declare that they've been on Suboxone, that if there's not that they need approval from their prescribing entity. And sometimes that prescribing entity is only open Monday through Friday and really only morning hours. So if somebody gets arrested on a Friday, needs Suboxone, they might not get approved until Monday for that. So Dr. Duhigg was already in that committee. He was already offering suggestions about a low-level dose that's safe enough to get people through to the Monday or to whenever they need that, when they can get the accurate services. I just want really want this whole council as ABCGC to really, I would love to see us working in some of that fashion to really vetting those programs, being aware of what is criteria, how do we run those. I know it's not our job to get into the weeds, but it really is inside that charter that we would be sort of vetting and understanding across all our governments what's happening. So I really appreciate Dr. Duhigg, our expertise at that whole ATAB. If you guys look it up, we have like all of these like doctors and therapists and treatment specialists and just every resource we could want at our fingertips to really try and put solutions to our issues around addiction treatment, not only within the jail, but, you know, county and citywide. And but thank you, Dr. Duhigg. If there's, I would ask also if you could has that progressed at all around getting that criteria, like sort of moving on developing a criteria for how, I don't know if you'd call it criteria. I think you guys are calling it standards of care, but also like what is the, has any of that progressed in getting some better qualities of care for folks at MDC?
Sure, Madam Chair and Commissioner Barbeau, and thank you for your comments and your enthusiasm about the whole process. And just to piggyback on what you said, ATAB is really wanting to provide any advice and guidance to any folks who are here on this call and have any addiction related certainly questions or touch that. So the short answer to your question is no, and that is because what we need to know is what is the standard operating procedure that already exists, especially when it comes to identifying folks and what's going on. Now the issuance or the delivery of methadone and Suboxone, hopefully, is not through Centurion but through another organization. This is through Recovery Services. And yeah, we have shared our thoughts with them, and we'll be hearing from them whether they are implementing any of that or not. Hopefully, but we really want to address the whole system, Centurion and Recovery Services, and certainly give our thoughts, or whether it's Centurion, whoever, to really give kind of guidance for, like you say, the best possible care. Now, with methadone, you gave the example of somebody who comes in and is arrested on a Friday and having to wait a few days in some cases, and that can be true with methadone. The one challenge with methadone is that it's not just kind of local standard of care. It is also state laws and then federal laws. It's an extremely regulated treatment, and so sometimes we can change these things and sometimes not. But we are interfacing with the State Opioid Treatment Authority as well, who has been very supportive in general.
Thank you, Dr. Duhigg. And just one more follow-up. As Commissioner Quesada was mentioning, as we move to a new medical provider, I would really love if the ATAP board and maybe some of our other expert boards would be part of developing like what we really want to see in the next medical provider. What must they be willing and ready to offer as part of our hiring process and our vetting in hiring them?
Nothing would give us more pleasure. And honestly, we would love to be a part of that process and have input on that.
Thank you, Dr. Duhigg. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. Any other questions? I am seeing none, but yes, thank you so much, Dr. Duhigg. And I agree with Commissioner Barbeau that the ATAB board is amazing. So we will move on to the next.
Very generous. Thank you.
Moving on to the next item, we have Resource Reentry Center update, and Councilor Bassan requested the update, and Margarita Chavez Sanchez will present.
Madam Chair, members of the ABCDC, thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak this afternoon. I have a couple of points to hit on the RRC and LEAD, and then I have an update. If it pleases the chair and the members, would it be okay if I just kind of roll through all of those updates? Because I think I may be able to answer some questions in kind of the larger conversation as opposed to kind of stopping with each item, if that's
yes,
okay.
Please do. Thank you.
All right. So many of you have heard about the Resource Reentry Center. The Resource Reentry Center has been in place for a number of years now. It is a part of a larger program called the Transition Planning Team Resource Reentry Center Program. So the Resource Reentry Center itself is a location, a physical location down at 4th and Roma at the Public Safety Center. It's that first floor on the north side of the building. The south side of the building is actually where clients are brought prior to incarceration for evaluation. So you can think of that whole floor as like the front end and back end of folks who are incarcerated and being received by law enforcement, evaluated and assessed medically by a Centurion or the medical provider, and then they come through the Resource Reentry Center upon release. So our program, our transition planning resource reentry program, actually starts engaging with clients at the moment of booking. So when this program was launched, a receiving screening was embedded into the booking and intake process at MDC. So every single inmate who is booked at MDC receives a receiving screening. That receiving screening screens for criminogenic risk. It screens for behavioral health needs to be inclusive of both mental health and substance use disorders. It also screens for suicidality via the Columbia Suicide Scale. It also screens for some social needs. And so that receiving screening is built of and comprised of multiple validated screens into one. With the completion of that screen, there is an automated score that's generated by the way that the clients answer the questions on the screen. That automated score creates a low, moderate, or high risk rate. Now, depending on how clients score on that receiving screening, they are essentially categorized in order to be served by one team or another to address those needs along that low, moderate to high risk screen. So now here comes the transition planning component. Any client or any inmate who has a moderate or high risk is then connected with a transition planning team member. So let's say I get booked in today, I go through that screening and I score an 8, which in this case is a high number. My information is then going to be sent over to the transition planning team, and that transition planning team can begin engaging and working with me. Prior to COVID, those transition planners are housed at MDC. They report to MDC every day. And at MDC, they then would go into the pods to meet with the clients. Since COVID, that process has changed slightly. Those transition planners have been conducting video visits with the clients. As they are a contractor, they are actually UNMH employees that are contracted with to provide the service. And as they are contractors, they were not allowed into the jail during the peak of COVID times. I'm going to fast forward a quick minute just to put a little bug in right here to say we are really excited that they will begin being back in MDC physically next week. So next week, they have completed all of their pre-screenings, right? Re-background. They had to redo all their background checks that had been some time since they had been in the jail. They had to do PREA trainings. All of the staff that are and contractors that are being allowed into MDC right now have to be vaccinated. And so they had to provide vaccination reports and whatnot, but all of that is done. Next week, they will get back into the swing, be orienting to the pod, especially now that we have a few new staff that have started since then. So we're really excited because as you can imagine, as we all live in this virtual space, engagement is very different in person versus kind of a virtual capacity. So in this setting in particular, engaging with the client, engaging with an inmate has been very complicated through a virtual channel. So we're really excited that the transition planners will be going back into the jail. So I'll rewind a bit now, aside from my announcement that they're going back in, and just say that, again, once they get assigned those clients, they begin working with them immediately. Something that's important to notice is that many of the clients who are booked into MDC or inmates who are booked into MDC are in and out of MDC in 48 hours, right? 72 hours max. We have a lot of clients who are in and out in that window. As you can imagine, oftentimes 48 hours or less than 48 hours is a very short window of time for a transition planner to meet with them in the pod, complete a full transition plan, develop a plan, identify housing, identify supports, find them a primary care provider, find them a psychiatric provider. Those of you who have kind of been engaged in this dialogue for some time or know kind of that behavioral health space, it takes a significant amount of time to at least just establish rapport, much less build those plans and get those plans ready to go into fruition. And so while those transition planners are working with clients in the jail, we recognize that there'll be a significant amount of clients who will discharge before they've either engaged with a transition planner or have had the opportunity to really build out a full plan for their release. So here comes the Resource Reentry Center. So the Resource Reentry Center, as I mentioned, is down at 4th and Roma. It's a physical location that we often market as like a gift shop, right? If you've been to an amusement park, you go on a ride and like you can't get off the ride without walking through the gift shop, right? So anyone who is released from MDC and who is not picked up at the jail comes downtown via a transport. That transport goes in through the gates and they have to walk through the reentry center in order to be released. Now, if they want to just leave, walk through and leave, they are returning citizens. We cannot hold them. They are welcome to leave. But we waive our sandwiches and our phone charging stations and our computers so that they have an opportunity to stop and engage. Even if in the moment that they arrive, they don't think that they want to engage with someone, maybe sitting down and having a cup of coffee is an opportunity for the case managers to sit with them and say, hey, is there anything we can help you with? Do you have a plan? Do you have a place to stay? Do you have a provider? What can we help you with? And sometimes it's just, hey, I need a pair of shoes. And we literally have clothes on site, give them those pair of shoes and allow them to go on their way. But again, it is an opportunity for us to engage. Our engagement since the RRC open has increased significantly. During the first year of the Resource Reentry Center, our engagement was around 50%. So around 50% of the amount of people who came through engaged in at least one service. That is up to over 80% now. So that's a huge increase. So that says that over 80% of the inmates or newly released citizens who are coming through the Resource Reentry Center are engaging in at least one service. And more than half of that 80% are actually truly engaging with the case manager and facilitating true case management. So this is huge, right? This is a huge level of engagement that was not previously in place in Bernalillo County. The Resource Reentry Center is something that, as we know, has a role with inmates at MDC and newly released citizens, returning citizens back into the community. So during the peak of COVID and during a peak of exposures at MDC, we did have to at times close the RRC and at times reduce hours. But we're really excited to announce that literally in 2 days, Saturday of this weekend, the top of this coming pay period, the Resource Reentry Center will be opening back to 24/7 operations. Again, as I mentioned, due to increased COVID exposures at MDC, possible COVID exposures with DBHS or Department of Behavioral Health staff, we had some staff turnover, and we have a newly established union in our department, and so we are in a status quo and can't do shuffling of staff from day to grave or swing to graveyard. But we are now fixed and we are at a great place. And so the Resource Reentry Center will be opening literally 2 days back to our 24/7 operation. So we're really excited to be able to provide that support to returning citizens 24/7. So quick segue into our law enforcement assisted diversion or our LEAD program. This program has been established for a few years through the Department of Behavioral Health Services. Initially, this program launched as we received a grant through the MacArthur Foundation. And with that grant, we were able to start that program. That program allowed us to create a partnership and relationships with local law enforcement, so APD and BCSO, as well as other criminal justice partners like the Public Defender's Office and the DA, to really identify ways that we can divert clients away from the criminal justice system. So as it stands, LEAD, Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion, has a couple of processes from which people can access the LEAD program. The first is your very traditional LEAD program. So let's now say I'm an officer and I respond to the scene of a call, and maybe it is a low-level burglary, and I engage with the client, and the client, it's clear to me that the client has broken into the vehicle, and in conversations with them, they say they broke into that vehicle because they needed to steal the tablet that was in the vehicle in order to sell it to purchase a drug. And it is clear that this client has an underlying substance-based need or a substance use disorder. And as opposed to booking them into jail for that charge, the officer has a discretion to bring them to the care campus and encourage them to engage in treatment as opposed to being booked. So we're diverting them away from the criminal justice system. Now, there are a number of requirements for the officer to review prior to referring them to lead, such as they don't have any outstanding felony warrants, the level of the crime that they've committed, lots of different factors that the officer is responsible for checking. But once that client is deemed eligible, they're brought to our care campus. Now, we do have case managers available to meet with those clients, and oftentimes it's during those daytime hours, but that doesn't preclude them from bringing us a client overnight. We provide them a safe place to stay and sleep. We feed them, we hydrate them, and then first thing in the morning, they're able to meet with that case manager. Now, that again, as I mentioned, is your traditional law enforcement referral. The second level is a social referral. That social referral can happen if a crime has not been committed and an officer identifies that someone needs to be connected to the LEAD program. When we were beginning this journey, we went out to Seattle to visit their LEAD program. Seattle is the first jurisdiction in the United States to launch a LEAD program. And we spoke with an officer who said, I had a client that I knew from my beat who said, hey, what's this LEAD program? And he told him about it, and he said, oh yeah, you have to commit a crime and then you can get plugged into the system. So she went back to her belongings and she came and she brought paraphernalia and had it in her hand and said, hey, I have this paraphernalia, I just committed a crime, can I get into that program? And they quickly realized that they should not make committing a crime be a prerequisite for getting into a program. If somebody wants to get in a program, they shouldn't have to commit a crime to get into a program. So they established a process for which it was a social referral, no crime committed or required. We also have an opportunity for community referrals, which is something we're working to build out even greater. Our law enforcement referrals are extremely low. During the month of March, we had less than 10 referrals, and our case managers only have a total of 7 clients on their caseloads. Each of our case managers can handle 50 to 60 clients. And so we have the capacity to serve many more clients in this program. So fortunately, the county manager convened a meeting last week with a number of our local criminal justice partners from the city and the county to identify ways that we can do a better job of addressing crime and doing some diversion on the front end. So we're excited to hear that we're back at the table to really promote to our partners how we can better utilize LEAD, as this is an existing resource that we have in place that is significantly underutilized. So Madam Chair, I know I said I was going to go through my whole spiel, but I feel like I just gave a lot of information. So it might be good for me to pause and then hit my other updates afterwards and ask for questions.
Okay, and I see that Commissioner Barbeau has been waiting patiently to ask you a question. Go ahead.
Thank you. And as usual, I'd like to talk and have probably more of a statement than a question, but I want, when the year that the West Mesa women were found, when those remains were found on the west side, right? That same year, a loved one of mine, her name was Amber Archibek, actually got out of the detention center in the middle of the night. Her grandfather was waiting at home to pick her up because he loved her so much, couldn't wait to get her. He knew she had addiction problems and he didn't get a call. She was released in the middle of the night. She got a hold of drugs between then, and she overdosed that evening. And I grew up with her family and saw the pain in her grandfather. And then literally within a month is when the stuff happened, when we found the remains of those women, our beloved women on the West Mesa. And at that point, we sort of, as working on that work, we combined and came together and said, look, this is ludicrous that we're dropping off. And there had been a case before of a woman being sexually assaulted, being released in the middle of the night. out of jail, right? And so at the time, Joy Junction Work started doing these pickups so that people at least wouldn't be dropped off and left alone in the middle. And through working through policy with Senator Linda Lopez and others, right, we actually created these requirements that the jail first let people, at one point it was just that they were letting people make phone calls or had access to phone calls. At first they did this thing where you could stay until morning light so that you're not in the middle of the night, but who wants to stay in jail? So I'm really thankful that both that the reentry center has been created, really with that as some of the basic foundation needs, right? Like how we don't leave people out into dangerous situations, how we don't leave people out without a way. Like I love that they can charge their phones there so that they can get a charge, call somebody to come and hopefully help them out. And that it's become this even greater resource where we're actually trying to connect folks to services. I am, and not in pointing any fingers in any which way, right? I'm disappointed that we couldn't figure out at least those very basic services during COVID, and that we weren't able to keep the even at some basic level of not letting people out in the middle of the night. Thankfully, none of that same stuff occurred. But it is a part. I just want to bring that awareness also to this. You all are going to hear me talk about addiction and treatment services a lot on this committee, because I believe that it's a big part of why this committee was formed. And I just want to keep bringing sort of those very basic awareness around how we do some very basic functioning around it. So I am glad that will be reopened. I do think that the way we approach both getting people through that system and thinking of it, right? I love that it has these resources, but how are we actually just making that very basic need to get out, and how are we measuring? I know we can't follow people, but we try and connect them to something, and if whether they take that offer or not, or how are we following or measuring the outcomes of the program, including some of this pieces, right? Like of the, if people, or even with the LEAD program, right? Like is the LEAD program, or how many people are going and asking for that services? How many people is it diverting from actual arrests? Where I think you said we're in 2 years now. So I guess that is one question I have, like if there's ways to know what the outcomes of that are after 2 years.
Madam Chair, Commissioner, we do have some follow-up tracking that happens through the Resource Reentry Center. So clients who are willing to sign a ROI, we do check with providers to see if they have connected with that provider. Say we get a client connected to St. Martin's Hope Works and we have an ROI signed. Our staff then can call St. Martin's and check in and see how the client is doing. Absolutely, if we have the client's phone number, it's not uncommon with this population that phone numbers change relatively frequently, but whatever contact information we do have, it is within our process to do follow-up. Our case managers do follow-up. This follow-up process is actually relatively new. Prior to just this past summer, we were contracting with the University of New Mexico to provide this service. Since then, those positions have come in-house and they are now county employees. And so part of the struggle with the last provider is that we couldn't really wrap our hands around and get a concrete process for which that follow-up happened. But now they're county employees and we have the opportunity to really streamline that process, including we actually house a county vehicle, one of our department vehicles, down at the RRC. If they need to go to St. Martin's and say, hey, John Smith, how are you doing? Let's check in. Is there anything I can help you with? And so while these clients don't necessarily remain on the caseload of the case managers at the RRC, there is a requirement that follow-up does happen and that we have the opportunity to engage for clients who need that additional support. Now, related to the LEAD, we do have some reporting on LEAD over the last few years. The first year, essentially, of the launch of the program was very much kind of a planning and development, right? Creating those relationships with all of our criminal justice partners. And we do have reporting, we do outcomes reporting. There is a tidbit of information in our monthly report that goes out from the county manager to to the commissioners. I don't recall, Clay, maybe check your head if that went out for this month yet or not. I'm not sure if it just went out or not, maybe almost there. Okay. So at the end of every month, towards the middle to the end of every month, an update goes out to the commissioners, and we do have kind of those data outputs. And so we are on track, I believe, in the coming year to begin a true outcome or a true evaluation from UNM ISR on our LEAD program. And so those evaluations are where we really get a good understanding of the impact of the program.
Thank you, Margarita. That's all, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Counselor Bassan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a few questions. So excited to hear that the RRC is opening on Saturday. I think that's going to make a world of difference. In regards to RRC, how often for those inmates that are there longer than the 48 to 72 hours, I know that we get a report even that sometimes says, you know, that there's 20 some to 30 days is kind of the average for the longer stay. How often do planners typically meet with them?
Madam Chair, Councillor Bassan, it varies. This work is very much, it's client-centered and trauma-informed. And so it's really dependent on the client themselves, their level of need and their level of engagement. Some clients really embrace the process and they want to meet regularly and fill out applications and get things going. And others, it takes a little bit longer to build that rapport. You know, in the behavioral health space, it is important that we create a model that can be blended to each individual person so that we are not saying, oh, if you don't engage in 2 days, you're out of the program, right? That doesn't work because some people, again, need a longer period of time to have that level of engagement. So it does vary. I know that prior to COVID, there were clients who were with the on the transition planners caseload like for a year. And during that period of time, the transition planners would meet with them once a week or every other week, depending on the amount of need that they had. For those longer term clients, as you would imagine, the level of engagement is much more intense initially, right? Where it's really doing an assessment of that, a needs assessment and developing that transition plan. And then beyond that, it's saying, okay, let's check on the status of your Section 8 application. Let's check on your primary care appointment. Let's see, how are your medications treating you? Are you interested in Suboxone? Are you interested in methadone, right? Having those continued conversations. As you can imagine, for many of our clients who are incarcerated for an extended period of time, oftentimes those needs that they have change. So if we conduct a needs assessment on day 3, that needs to be reassessed on day 30. Or day 60. So again, that is kind of continued engagement depending on the individual.
Okay, thank you. And Director, what is, okay, now shifting over to the LEAD, you kind of already talked about capacity, 50 to 60 per person working these cases, and they only have 7. So I think that is SOP 279, which is what I found on the law enforcement, like on APD's thing. It says draft when I print it out. Is that still pretty much updated and accurate?
Madam Chair.
Which I guess to clarify, I'm sorry, is the actual law enforcement assisted diversion standard of practice.
Madam Chair, Councillor Bassan, I'm not sure specifically on that SOP, the draft, and is that for APD?
It is for APD. I was just trying to find what, you know, to get the history kind of and what the parameters are and the rules. And I wanted to make sure to print it out and kind of do my homework for what the boundaries are with the LEAD program. But I'm just wondering if what I am reading is accurate now or not, but I can reach out to APD as well, I guess, if I need to.
Sure. Madam Chair, I'm not 100% sure of the SOP that's in policy, if it's draft or final. I can also reach out to them and share that with you.
Okay, and that would be great too, if you would. So right now you said like with people going into, when an officer is deciding and somebody is going to be recommended for the LEAD program and they go to the CARES campus, I understand like right now we have the social model, so people have to be willing to. Is there going to be a time where maybe this could be something we can go into with the medical model so that if there is an inebriated person, once the CARES campus actually opens that medical model, will we be able to assume that maybe we will see an uptick in the utilization of the LEAD program, or am I totally off base?
Madam Chair, Counselor, I think maybe it's two separate conversations. Traditionally, the clients that are brought into LEAD are not necessarily brought in as inpatient clients, so to speak, unless they are actively detoxing and are actively requesting a detox from us. So they come and meet with the case managers, and then that's the location, that's kind of like their home site, right? So if you imagine if somebody had a case manager at, again, HopeWorks, they would go back to HopeWorks and meet with that client, or they'd meet their case manager somewhere in the park or in a community location. And that is the model with LEAD. And so I think the two separate conversations are on kind of the larger direct substance-based programming on the care campus and the LEAD program, which is housed out of the care campus, but the clients don't necessarily stay there for an extended period of time for treatment. Now, it doesn't mean that someone could not be referred to LEAD who wasn't actively detoxing and who could benefit from that service, and they are absolutely welcome to participate.
Okay, awesome. And Madam Chair, just two more questions, which I can lump into this one. These are the big ones. I don't even know if you'll really have answers. I kind of hope you will, but if not, can you please get back to us on how do we grow both what can we do to grow the utilization of both the RRC and the LEAD program? Where can we, advocate for it? What needs are out there? What challenges exist in making sure that if we need to fine tune it as a council or as a commission, where do we stand with kind of improving the basis and the foundation so that we can actually see the fundamentals of this getting used more?
Madam Chair, Councillor Bazan, thank you so much for even the offer of support. I think that's really important. As I mentioned, we're really fortunate to have, under the county manager's leadership, the first meeting that we had last week with, I think, the right players at the table, because I think what we need from support is support from the top, right? The LEAD program really will be successful if it's promoted from law enforcement leadership. And post that meeting, we quickly had received an email from Under Sheriff Covington saying, "Hey, I need more training for BCSO. We're going to roll this out. How can we help?" And so just that meeting itself was a precipice for some of that support from BCSO. And it's my understanding that the manager has also had conversations with Chief Medina around really doing whatever we can on the APD side. I think what we need to do within the department, and we've already begun doing this as a response to that meeting, is developing messaging for wide distribution. So as soon as we have that messaging ready in form of a one-pager or a flyer, and how to really get that message out and how to access this service, would love to ascertain all of your supports to help share that with your networks and communicate the importance of the program.
Nice, thank you. Any other questions for Margarita? Seeing none, thank you for the update. And
Madam
we will.
Chair, I'm sorry, I think, did the director have more to the presentation, right?
Margarita, did you cover both?
I did cover RRC and LEAD. I have some general department updates.
Okay.
Or BHI updates.
And okay, I see that Commissioner Barboa has her hand up again. So do you have a question now?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just another statement, or hopefully, like I said, I would hope these could be conversations that we have. So just in a little conversation to what Councillor Bazan is presented, right? But I want to know, and I'll say again, right, that the piece around how when we talk about homeless, like none of these are in silos and they're all intermixed. And I think we know that, we heard it from even in APS's presentation about how they're intersecting the issues together. And that when we talk about homeless, I want us to start to just talk out loud about addiction and treatment services. Some of the biggest pieces that we're not actually talking about it, and we're not talking about it directly. And I think it is some of the ways that most of our communities actually resonate, right? With most, and if you grew up in Albuquerque, you know and love somebody that has been impacted by substance use issues. So I just wanted to say that part of I think supporting it is talking about it clearly and not just in one big lump of all the things.
Thanks for that. And Margarita, did you have something else to add?
Madam Chair, if you are okay with it, I can move to kind of the next item for the department updates.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So as a little bit of a segue from what Commissioner Barbara just mentioned, I want to just re-highlight the value that we have from Dr. Duhigg and the Addiction Treatment Advisory Board. Dr. Duhigg has participated with the department in a couple of meetings recently around navigating challenges as it pertains to addiction, including one with Secretary Hotram Lopez about addressing facilities that are within her purview and their ability to accept clients on medication-assisted treatment. So we think a lot about medication-assisted treatment in the community, but what if somebody is needing long-term support or long-term care and they are on Suboxone or methadone? And so the Addiction Treatment Advisory Board has raised a concern that many long-term care facilities and long-term treatment facilities do not accept clients on MAT. And so that creates a barrier and a discrepancy. So with Dr. Duhigg's support, we have met with Secretary Hotram Lopez to identify ways that we can address this need in the community. So that's just another example of the ways that we have an opportunity to leverage the knowledge and the bandwidth of the expertise at the Addiction Treatment Advisory Board. And we will be working very closely with Dr. Duhigg moving forward with Centurion and or a new medical provider to ensure that an appropriate standard of care is in place as it pertains to addictions care as a whole at MDC and in all of our programs in the county. With that, another piece that's really exciting to know is that, as many of you know, the department operates our addiction treatment program. That addiction treatment program is actually in MDC. It is a 28 to 30 day program with utilizing community reinforcement approach for inmates who often are required by court order or by the judge to participate in this addiction treatment program, some of which are released upon completion. With COVID, that program was on a little bit of a hiatus, but I'm excited to announce that for a couple of weeks now, that program has been back live and it is caring for clients in MDC. Another program that I mentioned briefly at the last ABCGC meeting is we have our community engagement teams that is officially on and moving, and we will be doing an announcement in the coming weeks to announce that provider formally and ways that folks can access our community engagement teams. Our community engagement teams are low-level, peer-based teams that can engage with clients who are pre and post-crisis and needing additional supports that don't require a 911 response. So you all have heard from Mariela and the city around their plans to develop a non-law enforcement response for individuals in need of those supports. This team is very similar. We are working closely with the city to make sure that we're going in parallel tracks because we know the need is so great that it should not be like, oh, this is a city thing or oh, this is a county thing, right? We have a lot of people to serve here. So we're gonna work closely with the city to make sure that we're working collaboratively in the launch of that program. Other pieces that we met in the last few weeks with APS around our school-based health centers. And so we're really excited that we are moving mountains to get school-based health centers up and moving. Thank you, Commissioner Quesada, who I think just jumped off, but Commissioner Quesada, for your leadership in really pushing this from your first day in office forward. And we have had continued support from the remainder of the commission on really working to launch these school-based health centers. We are now really exploring what a mobile school-based health center looks like. So if you've seen that, a mammography van or a press health van, right? How can we make a school-based health center into a mobile unit so that it's not just locked into one school, right? If we could be at LBJ on Tuesday and Adobe Acres on Wednesday and West Mesa on Thursday, whatever that school is, we have an opportunity to bring this service to more than just one fixed location. And so we're really excited about those continued conversations with APS. I believe we have another meeting in early May to really look at some data. We want to make sure that the data drives where those school-based health centers are housed, or how that mobile unit is assigned in the community, and what that looks like. And so again, really excited about the progress we're making on this project. The Care Campus, as you all know, has been ongoing a renovation and a revamp. So we're excited that the first phase of our renovation will be done in June. This will allow us to expand our capacity in our public inebriate intervention program from 20 to 60. So we are really excited about this significant increase to be able to serve clients in the community. That program will convert to an observation and assessment unit, and will be able to serve clients who have no substance use need and a primary behavioral health need, but are needing observation and assessment, or clients who have a primary or only substance-based need. And so it really is giving us an opportunity to be a care campus and not just a detox center, where people think that's the only thing we do, right? We do a lot more than provide detox. And so this expansion is allowing us to do that. The second phase of that renovation is predicted to be completed in December. That will allow us to open an outpatient behavioral health clinic, which we know is in dire need in the community, to be accessed by anyone in the community. We expect that center will also be able to provide Suboxone to clients who are interested. So again, that is a high need in the community as well. And it will be also launching a living room model on that site. So if people want to drop in, engage with a peer, have low level, non-traditional clinical type interventions, but again, non-traditional meeting with a peer in a setting that literally looks like your living room, then they have the opportunity to access that as well. So again, we're really excited about the expansion on the campus. As was previously mentioned by Madam Chair, we do have a couple of tours scheduled in the next couple of weeks, I believe. And so that is an open invitation. If anyone is interested in either a virtual tour or an in-person tour, please let us know. We're happy to show you the Care Campus. Sometimes it's really helpful to see it, because I can give you all the bullets and information, but until you see it, it doesn't quite paint the picture that we want you to have. So if anyone is interested, that invitation is open. Last update that I have, I apologize, I know we're running late tonight. Last update I have is about our gap analysis. So that's a big one, right, for all of us at this dais and for our community. As you all know, the city and the county both passed resolutions around a joint gap analysis. That gap analysis is live. We are, I would say, about a third through of that gap analysis. Our provider is reviewing all documents from the county, and the city is meeting with providers in the community, engaging in dialogue with our team, with the city's team, to really look at gaps. The intention of that gap analysis is to look at behavioral health services, to look at housing services, to look at social services, criminal justice system issues. And so it really is a systems-wide gap analysis. We felt that while our selfish interest was really looking at gaps in the behavioral health continuum, we felt that we could not do justice in assessing gaps unless we looked at the entire system. Commissioner Barboa, to your point, we do not want to facilitate further silos. And so this gap analysis, again, is looking at the larger system and what gaps we can address both in the city and the county. So we're excited about that. We expect that will be done. We'll at least have a draft in mid-June, and that will help us to inform essentially our strategic planning moving forward. And with that, I'll stand for some questions.
Councillor Bassan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a meeting I've been eagerly looking forward to, so I'll try to keep it brief. But with Director, what you were just saying, I think that the strategic plan is something that people keep talking about in these different meetings that keeps coming up. What I know that County Manager had mentioned is I suggested, why do we have to wait for the gaps analysis to be completed before we start drafting something? And I think that as we heard what feels like it was a while ago now, but from APS, I think that was a great start to a strategic plan. It doesn't have to be something that is so detailed that we never really figure out where we're going. I think that we do need to come up with something in order to be productive. Commissioner Barboa brought up, low hanging fruit. It's like my new motto lately is to say, what are the small goals that we can achieve in anything we do, whether it's reducing crime or treating mental illness or reducing drug addiction, any of these things. But if we're just going to treat mental illness and eliminate homelessness, we're never going to get there, because we need to find the little baby steps to take the process. So I really want to figure out what we're doing for the strategic plan, and when are we going to start just talking about that at these meetings, where as a commission, as a council, with I talked to CAO Nair earlier this week, and she was very much on board with, I'm generalizing, don't quote me on this. This is not me quoting her, but, columns. This is what our needs are. City here, county here. This is what, the city's taking and saying, we'll start chipping away at this. The county will chip away at this. Here's a deadline. Like, let's start setting some goals so that we can help as a commission. I think that would be really beneficial, because we're getting such great information. Now, what are we doing with it? And I don't think that we need to wait for the gaps analysis to come in to at least start getting the general information and putting it together with what our intentions are and how are we going to work on that. And I think another way to start too is the programs list. Like, I see this alphabet soup. I see all of these different things. What do we really have? What should we evaluate? Is this working? That was another thing that CAO Nair said. It's PPP, and Isaac, if I need help, please help me. But persevere, pivot, or perish. I got it. So really analyze everything that we're doing in these different groups and these different capabilities and programs that we have for all of the things, whether it's city or county. We're all suffering the same problems. So how do we go about deciding, is this awesome? Do we need to change it? Or do we need to scrap it and not waste any of the tiny little resources that we're kind of dribbling and sprinkling out there? So I do hope that as other business, or kind of falling on the heels of Margarita with what she's saying, what are we going to do with the strategic plan? How do we come up with kind of a general idea so that it can be in pencil, we can change it when we get the gaps analysis. Nobody's saying that we have to, carve it in stone between now and then.
Okay, so thank you. Margarita, did you want to reply to that, or?
Madam Chair, I was just making sure there wasn't a question in there for me.
Okay.
No, thank you. I'm sorry, Madam Chair. It wasn't really a question, Director. It's just more based off of what you just said with all of these fabulous things and all of the capabilities we have. What are we going to do with them now? Because you're reporting stuff, and the county is working over here, working on really awesome things. You have the city working over here on really awesome things. I really want to see us not spinning wheels or working so independently of each other. I would like to commit to working together, at least for my part, on how I can help advocate for both ends without just saying, okay, well, this is Albuquerque's responsibility only, or this is the county's responsibility only. So, and then we come together and we talk about all these great things, but I think we can make more forward progress if we start these. And I think that subcommittee was a very good start. I think that was a very good beginning. How do we keep leveraging that? And it's more of a rhetorical question at this point in time, but there's no direct question for you, just how do we keep it going?
Yeah. Thank you for that comment, Counselor. Okay, I see no other hands, so let's move on. Opportunities for subcommittees to address the commission. Are there any subcommittee members present to speak?
Madam Chair, we don't have any subcommittee members with us today.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other business then that needs to be discussed? Seeing none, I will go ahead and announce the next Albuquerque Bernalillo County Government Commission plus APS meeting. That'll be Thursday, May 27, 2021 at 5 p.m. via Zoom. And if there's no other business, this meeting is adjourned. Have a good night, everybody.